E3 and we're just 1 week removed from the release, finally, the release of Batman Arkham Knight. It's been a long road, and I guess you guys are finished. You're just here relaxing, right? Showing the game off to people.
Yeah, I mean, it's been great to be here at E3 because after spending nearly 3.5 years working on a game under the radar, it's really kind of finally we can show our hard work to the public, and I love it. You know what I mean? It's very kind of it's very nice. It's gonna be time for us in 4-5 days now until Tuesday to really kind of celebrate the release of the game. Exciting.
Yeah, and it's such an anticipated title as well, and people have been very sort of keen to learn about it and explore more of it. You're still, of course, keeping a lot of the story under wraps, but I think at the press conference, I heard that little snippet, this is how the Batman dies. Is there anything you can say about that, or is that for people to find out?
I think it's fair to say we shouldn't kind of say anything about the story, and it's really kind of the experience of playing the game is really kind of unveiling the story. It's really important to keep everything under wrap until people experience it. Yeah, definitely. You will. I won't say anything about that.
Maybe it's best that way. So let's talk about your field of expertise, the art of it. What's it been like to sort of craft the art of such an iconic character, such an iconic world, and sort of make it, giving it your own touch?
Yeah, I mean, it's been kind of it's been a challenge. You know, I mean, we've been working on a trilogy for 8 years now. You know, since Arkham Asylum. So it's been a journey, you know, and we didn't rush it because we started with Asylum, which was quite, a claustrophobic kind of narrative, and after that we moved to City and started to kind of expand a bit of the Batman's, I would say DNA. You know, we started kind of gliding and kind of expanding, and finally with Arkham Knight, I think we're just creating the ultimate kind of Batman experience, because finally we got the Batmobile in there, we got Gotham City kind of huge. And, I mean, we learn to walk before running, and we learn to drive, in a way. It's kind of we took things step by step. And aside that, the new console, the new generation console arrived just at the right moment for us to have the technology to really kind of do what we really wanted to do, you know what I mean? So it was kind of a long journey, but we did it step by step.
If we talk about the Batmobile, you got your own take on the Batmobile, very, very special. What kind of thinking went into designing that and sort of giving it its look?
I mean, designing such an iconic thing is quite a complex kind of process, because, of course, aside the visual design, you got of course the gameplay, and that is an organic kind of system as well. So it took ages to kind of design the Batmobile, I mean, we started doing a version which was more like a muscle car, and while we were kind of doing some research, Sefton was kind of starting to kind of have a more kind of defined kind of view on what the design was going to be. Wanted to be a really great car, but at the same time kind of do combat with it. So we scrapped everything and started from scratch, and the idea of having the kind of the two modes kind of came in. So we got the driving mode and the battle mode. So it's just kind of something very simple, spreading your hands. So just creating the kind of the two mode, you drive and you become battle mode, and you can just kind of move more in a 360 kind of freedom. So that was really kind of important. That was a genesis to kind of reach that point, you know what I mean? And after that, on top of that, of course, you got the visual design of the Batmobile, which I would say it's a mix between a sport car, a jet fighter, and a tank. So you got all these kind of elements kind of mixed together to create the Batmobile.
And what's the cooperation with DC like on something like this? I'm sure they have input as well. Do you bounce ideas with them and talk about everything that you're doing, or how does it work?
Yeah, I mean, we are always in close contact with DC and Warner in everything we do. But what's great as well working with DC is just the trust they have, with us now after the third game. They kind of it's always great to kind of bounce ideas with them, and they give us the freedom to really explore things, which is nice.
And with this game as well, you're designing a villain that's sort of a brand new villain. That's also something very sort of big to do in this universe.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, designing a villain from scratch is kind of like something amazing in such kind of like a massive, massive franchise. You know, like Batman is such kind of like an iconic character, but the villains are even like, as iconic as Batman as well. So it was really good to kind of like add to the gallery, and we needed to kind of like craft a villain that will kind of like make sense, because Gotham City is like being invaded by kind of like drones, tanks, and an army. So we wanted really to kind of like create that character that will be some kind of like a mix between a military commander, and a tactician, and someone that could go like head to Batman. And once again, the visual design is very kind of like close in a way to Batman. It's got even like small ears and, gauntlet boots, and with some kind of like red camo, fatigues, And so it kind of like made sense. It kind of like clicked when we kind of like designed it. Yeah.
Has that theme also influenced how you design the other villains in this game, or are they sort of still stuck in with their iconic looks, or what? How do you what?
I mean, what we like to do as well is just like, make the villain evolve through the game. We shaved the penguin's head, I mean, like it's got no hair. I mean, like one of the kind of like, iconic characters as well is Harley Quinn. I really like to kind of like, move the design between each game, like we started in Asylum and there was kind of like a hint of a nurse outfit, moving to City, she was more a bit like closer to the kind of like iconic Harley Quinn kind of like outfit, but with some kind of like with a twist. And since Joker's death, now it's something different as well now, because she's kind of like a Black Widow, so she's a lot darker, got a bit like more kind of like gothic Lolita kind of like feel to her. So it's nice to kind of like have that evolution, to character, to give once again that kind of like believability and consistency in the worlds we're creating.
So in terms of Gotham, now you sort of got a bigger place to fill out, and sort of how's the art of Gotham? How are you gone about sort of recreating the city or creating the city that the game is set in?
Yeah, the first kind of like challenge when we built Gotham City was to craft it around the Batmobile, because of course like the Batmobile is an extension to Batman's DNA, I mean, we had to add on top of like what we had to kind of like make the full experience. So just like even thinking of like the size, the width of the roads, we had to kind of like design that in a way that it will make the game fun to play with such kind of like a big car, because the Batmobile is massive, compared to like a normal taxi. But what means kind of like widening all the streets, you kind of like need to make all the buildings kind of like higher as well, to kind of like keep like a nice ratio with a scale, what I mean? Like, so it was like all these things kind of like coming together, and for the games as well, the kind of architecture, kind of like journey is really interesting, and then working with like Gothic building and bolting kind of like, statues on it, and the big challenge was to make Gotham City feel like it's a city that people are living in as well. And so we had to kind of like invent like hundreds of brands to create shops, neon signs and adverts and stuff like that. It was kind of like really kind of like interesting. I think it's like 220 different brands, just like, to spread around. We picked some from the DC universe as well, so kind of like make nice cameos. So yeah, and the big challenge as well is just like Gotham City in Arkham Knight is 5 times the size of Arkham City, but we always wanted to keep the same attention to detail. And what's really important is that kind of like finely crafted, everything is made by hand. There is no kind of like random generator, every single kind of backalley is kind of like been put together by an artist, and it's like, yeah, it's a ton of work, but like the result is there, and really, really happy with the result.
I look forward to seeing it in all its glory when I get back from E3. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.